I'm Abubakar Abdullahi in Nairobi. From Kenya and across the globe, this program takes an exclusive look in evocative matters in business, sports, technology, and politics. But first, let's get the day's headlines. 60 dead as US moves embassy to Jerusalem. North and South Korea reaches agreement. Just how free can elections be anymore? Let's get to our top story. 60 Palestinians have been killed following clashes between Palestinians and Israelis after a US decision to move its embassy to Jerusalem. Palestinians were protesting against the move, which has also received international condemnation. Moving on. Leaders from the two Koreas have agreed to end the Korean War 65 years after hostilities ended, in a move that will see the demilitarization of the Korean Peninsula. The two presidents signed a peace agreement. To our top story, just how free can elections be anymore? 13 Russians have been criminally charged of interfering with the US elections of 2016 in favor of Donald Trump. Russia is accused of interfering with the American elections, an accusation the Kremlin denies. In Kenya, the Apex Court, the Supreme Court that is, annulled the presidential result of the 8th of August poll, citing irregularities and illegalities. That informs the topic of our discussion. But first, let's get to our reporter, Hebrews Rono, and listen to what he has put aside for us.
The flashy lights of Hollywood, the world's largest economy. By far, America to many is the ideal place. The maturity of its democracy is envied across the globe. But that is also challenged in the wake of the elections of its 45th president, Donald Trump. An alleged Russian interference in the 2017 elections has shocked America. How a group secretively cyber-attacked the electoral system is yet to be established, with investigations still ongoing. But Trump occupies the top office, stamping his America First policy. Millions of miles away, the narrative plays in equal measure in Kenya, America's ally in East Africa. The country's Apex Court nullified the 8th of August poll due to what it termed as irregularities and illegalities. A month later, a repeat poll was organized with the leading opposition absconding. No one felt the effects more than John Juma, a local businessman.
Now, every other time we could close down and open because they could say that they are coming on the ground. But not any single person could give us exact time they could be doing these rallies because they could do it impromptu. And of course, we had got threats from security agency. This included Major League GSU and other regular patrol men and women in uniform.
In what was a divided political season, opinions are still divided on the full effect the repeat poll has. To Jamnik Madunda, a social media activist, democracy is worth paying for, hence the repeat poll is justified.
As a social media activist, I was so much happy since the court had ruled in our favor in what cause we were fighting for. We were fighting for democracy in Africa and democracy in across the whole world.
With the ongoing FBI investigations yet to establish the extent of Russia's interference with the American elections amid allegations of system hacking in Kenya, is it time to ask whether elections will be free again? Hebrews Rono reporting for ATV.
Hebrews, thanks for the piece. Of course, you're joining us live. Just before we let you go, as a journalist who has, of course, covered elections in different countries, does the prospect of having a free and fair election stand anymore?
Covering the election period has been a wonderful and at the same time a very difficult experience because most of the voters stand out in large numbers to come and exercise their right to vote. Unfortunately, the people in charge of the voting systems inconvenience them because of the number of the service providers was smaller than the number of the voters that came. Something else is that the voting system had technical issues that made the whole exercise a difficult job to do. Most of the aspirants also complained that their voters turned in large number but were inconvenienced, maybe because other aspirants bought them to get more votes than them, which these allegations led to very many clashes that made people, some of them, not able to vote at the long run.
Indeed, Bruce, thanks for joining us. We appreciate for your time. And now let's bring in our panel of experts, John Wilson Njoroge, who is a frequent commentator on African politics, Felix Maringa, who is actively involved in politics, and Simiyu, who is a journalist rather, who covers elections. Gentlemen, thanks for joining me. John Wilson, let me start with you. Of course, Africa is blamed to be a continent with strong men often overstaying in power. With the interference of elections, as we see at the moment, thrive, does the prospect as well of a free election stand?
What I would say is that the context of African politics and electoral processes, they are influenced by culture, heritage, and experiences that we've been through. And so definitional standards should be based on the culture, experiences, and the heritage that we have as a continent. So whether there is room for that or not, I would say that yes, strong men are there. What we should be addressing is the issue of corruption in the process.
Maringa, you claim the elections in which you participated in last year has been a faulty one, if I can remember. What are the costs of such elections on people like you who have vied?
The cost of faulty elections is quite high. One, I'd say there's a lot of emotional damage that actually happens to individuals, because when you decide to vie, you've invested your time, emotions, and there's a lot of people around you who actually expect the very best of you. So when you don't win, you feel like you've failed yourself first as an individual, and you've also failed the rest of the team. So that becomes a little bit hard. It causes some emotional pain, it causes damage, and at times there are people who've actually committed suicide because of depression. So it actually has far-reaching implications.
Before I get to Simiyu, of course, let me get back to John. John, what will it need to have a free and fair election in any African country?
I would say that we need history more than anything. And so to address some of these issues, what we need to ask ourselves is what has happened in the past, what is happening currently, and where do we want to go, and what standards do we want to set in place, because the external hand is really determining what is happening in Africa. And the definition of electoral process should be guided by the values that we hold as African people.
Simiyu, as a journalist who covers the day-to-day running of politics and elections, being part of your task, some of the things that you do, of course, what are some of the stories you hear people talk about at a grassroots level in terms of elections being interfered with?
Yes, of course, there are frustrations when you go vote and then you come to realize, or you hear that it has been tampered with, because of course it will give you some bit of restlessness. And so just like the people in the townships, in the town, in the cities or in the towns, people in the villages are more frustrated, because you see now they get the ripple effect. You know, in the city there are very many other stuff that you can do. You can what we call hustling. But in the village, these are people who depend on agriculture. These are people who depend on the good road that they're going to do for them. These are people who depend on the village for their survival. And so if they choose the specific leader they thought will bring the change, and then they are shortchanged, then they become angry. And so many people in the villages, to date, they are angry because of such actions. And I think if they were given a chance, they will install a leader without elections.
Maringa, probably from a politician's point of view, your own argument, what can be done to make sure such scenarios?
I think what can be done, the very first thing is making sure that any time that people are going to an election, whether within an institution, whether within the country, or even world over, that the systems are fair enough. Now, fair in terms of does it follow the right procedures, does it follow the right processes? And remember what happened in the Kenyan election 2017. When the Chief Justice nullified the election, he said that because the process was faulty, then even the end result was faulty in itself. So ideally, what should happen is the process should be right from word go to the very last minute. The process should be right. Then I think the second thing it should be, I think African elections, especially within the African continent, they've been made to be very prestigious, and so people go there for prestige and like service. So we also need to now, what is it called, restructure the whole thing, that people will now be looking at the service that they need to offer as compared to the prestigious office that they are going to occupy. The last thing, I think, what should be done is making sure that from the time that maybe the voting has been conducted and everything else, that even the procedures that follow, whether people are using technology, that people cannot hack into the same system. And ideally, what happened in the United States, where Trump was actually accused of having hacked into the system through Russia. Yes, so I think that if the three things are done right, then we could have probably a better election system.
Gentlemen, I understand we are out of time, but one last question to John. John, looking at the future, is it bright or bleak in terms of having a free and fair election?
I would say that the future is bright with a generation of young people who are passionate, young people who inspire and innovative. And so they see more opportunities in this country and creating room for the next generation. So based on that, I would say there is a bright future for Africa. All we need to do is to stand and be the best that we can be.
Thank you. John Wilson Njoroge, Felix Maringa, and Simiyu, a journalist, an active politician, and a commentator on politics. Gentlemen, thanks for joining me. That brings us to the end, of course, of this discussion. Remember, you can be part of the conversation. Leave us a comment on our Facebook page, that is Abubakar Abdullahi, and on Twitter, use the Twitter handle @Abubakar Abdullahi.